If you've been thinking of moving to Madrid, but you're not really sure of what neighborhoods to move into, what exactly to look for in a contract, this video is going to be for you. Hey guys, I'm Danielle. I'm an American. I've been living in Madrid, Spain for close to 2 years now, and today we're going to be going through a few different neighborhoods that give Madrid its beautiful name and what you should specifically be looking out for when it comes to the renting process, in regards to the wording of the contract, things that are put into the contract, and the way that you're treated when it comes to a deposit. We'll also be going over some things that I wish someone would have told me when I first moved out here. So without further ado, let's get into it. Choosing a neighborhood when you're moving to a new city is going to be probably one of the most important things you can do aside from the actual condition of the apartment itself. At least in my opinion, there are some neighborhoods in Madrid that you definitely do not want to go to if you're within a certain age range, and there are certain areas that you definitely do. It just depends on the kind of person you are and the kind of life that you want to experience when you move out here. Me, for example, I'm in my early 20s, but I don't necessarily want to be surrounded by people all the time. I am a bit of a grandma, so when it comes to super loud noise, when it comes to just hustle and bustle all the time, for me, Malsaña would not be a good fit. Instead, I chose Retiro. I chose Chamberi. What does all this mean? Basically, Madrid is divided into a bunch of different districts. I think the proper term is called a borough, but regardless, there's about 21 of them, at least to my knowledge. Each of them has their own kind of personality, their own characteristic, their own unique flair, and it just depends on what kind of experience you want to have, and that will dictate what kind of borough you find yourself living in. So when, for example, I mentioned Malsaña, this is known to be a super trendy area, very artsy, very alternative, very good for young people who are really into the art scene and who give kind of that more bohemian vibe. There's a lot of vintage clothing stores that I personally love going to, same thing with the bars, like the nightlife is actually fantastic there. But the downside of it is that because it's this new up and coming kind of area, it is going to be a bit more pricey than some other neighborhoods you could find yourself in. And this brings me into the neighborhood that I chose, Chamberi. Why did I choose it? Because it's known to be a lot more residential. Within the little area that I'm in, it's called Little Italy because there's so many different Italian markets, a literal tiramisu place, a gelato place, an Italian grocery store that sells more pasta than I can even count. It's cute, it's quaint, it's quiet, and the typical age range of the people that are here, at least right now, the day that I'm recording this in February 2025, is out of the older demographic. So think 60s and up. For me, I really like this because it's just a hop away from some of the other neighborhoods that I find myself in more frequently, like Salamanca or Retiro. But when it comes to the end of the day, I don't want to have the hustle and bustle of traffic, the hustle and bustle of people. I just want to have my quiet, I want to have my peace, and nothing provides that, at least in my opinion, like Chamberi. When I first moved out here, I did actually live in Retiro, which is one of the neighborhoods I just previously mentioned. And this one sounds exactly as it is. It is right in front of Retiro Park. It's very well connected to public transport. There's a lot of cafes nearby. This one is a bit more residential in regards for families. And I liked it, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed my time there. But I would hear people just walking around at night, and especially if you're coming home after a very long day, the last thing you want to have to deal with is hearing people outside. So for me, Retiro was really beautiful because you have the park right in front of you, but it just was a little bit too noisy for my liking. The neighborhood that is directly on the other side of Retiro Park, the one that I find myself in most often for working, for meeting friends for coffee, etc., is Salamanca. Now this one is considered to be a bit more of like the high-end, the posh area. It's known for having a lot of luxury stores, fine dining, things of this nature, but it is, in my opinion, a very polished place to be, and it is peaceful. Obviously not as peaceful as Chamberi because there is still a lot of people there because of the immense amount of shopping you can do. So if it sounds like your vibe, then maybe you want to check it out. But if you're not willing to blow the bank, then maybe look at a few other options. Especially if you are in your younger years, La Latina is one that I highly recommend. It's one that one of my former roommates actually moved to. This neighborhood is known for their nightlife. They have really narrow streets just filled with bars, filled with little restaurants, just filled with a lot of different multicultural things that you can kind of sink your teeth into. For me, it's just a bit too touristy for my liking. There's a lot of people, there's always something going on. But if you are really in that social vibe, if you want to meet new people, you want to walk outside and just create a new friend, then this is going to be a really good district for you. There's a ton more that I could get into, but the last one that I'll bring up here is Chueca. This is what we like to call the Rainbow District. This is the most LGBTQ friendly area that I found, at least in Madrid, and it's known for having really lively nightlife, a lot of bars, a lot of different cultural scenes. It's very artsy, and it just has that really good young energy. For me, I love going there to either meet up with friends or to literally just spend an afternoon, but it isn't something that I'd necessarily want to live in just because, again, because it is so popular, it's a bit more touristic-y, there's a lot more traffic, and when you want quiet, you just want quiet. And you're not really going to get a lot of that unless you're in specific areas within the little district. So it's really just about knowing yourself within the city and what exactly it is that you're looking for. Now that we have that out of the way and you kind of understand a little bit more about the layout of the city, these are things that you should be aware of when it comes to the renting out process. Especially if you are an American, I'm speaking to you Americans right now. People will try to take us for granted because they think we either have a lot of money and we don't care how we spend it, or they think we're stupid, or they think we're too lazy to actually do anything about it. I'm not saying that as a dig at any Spanish person. That has literally just been my experience dealing with different real estate agents. So one of the first things I will say to any American who's watching is read the contract, make sure that it's translated. A lot of the times, at least what I found when it's come to receiving a contract, is that it will be written fully in Spanish. And if you come from a Spanish-speaking country or you know Spanish, then fine, that may be all right for you. But if you're an American and you're like me and you only speak English, then this can be a really easy and tricky way for landlords to sneak in random little rules, random little regulations, random little sentences that either don't make sense or restrict you in some way, shape, or form. So for example, I was looking to get an apartment in the Ibiza area. So if you have Retiro and you have Salamanca, then right in the middle of both of them is Ibiza. I was super excited about this apartment that I found. It was perfect in terms of the square meters. It was perfect in terms of the price. And then when I asked for the real estate agent to give me a contract, he asked me why I wanted it. So he was showing me resistance and that he didn't even want to create a contract until I gave him money, which is a huge red flag, by the way. And then when he finally did give me the contract, it included a bunch of really weird clauses that he never mentioned when he was giving me the tour. When he was giving me the tour, he said nothing about not having pets, and in the contract it said that I could not have a pet. In the contract I asked if we could do a little, and he said, yeah, as long as the windows are open, and then in the contract it said it was strictly forbidden. And then when it came to the actual wording that they used, in some areas they were very specific, and in others they were really vague. And this was another huge red flag for me, because part of actually putting down a deposit is paying 2 months. For a lot of places, they either ask for 1 or 2 months. As a safe bet, I always just planned for 2 months, and that's what it was for this apartment. So in total, before I even finished my first month in the apartment, I would have had to have paid for 3 months worth of rent, because the 2 for the deposit and then the 1 for the actual month I'd be there. And if you think about it, that's a lot of money. That can easily run you 24, 26, or even up to 3,000 euros, depending on how much it is that you're looking at. So when you're dealing with those kinds of numbers, you want to make sure that you're going to get that back. You want to make sure your money is safe. And something that I found really, really fishy was all these vague nuances that were just scattered within the contract, when in some areas of the contract, it was super crystal clear. An example of this is they wouldn't give me my deposit back if the apartment was found in any condition less than when it was given to me. That doesn't really give me a lot to work with, which if you're living in the US, that typically means that you know more or less of what's going on. You need to replace the refrigerator, the heating is kind of out of whack, maybe you need to get a new air conditioner. Like, they make it known what is going on in there. But out here in Spain, you could have a crack in the ceiling, you could have something going on that maybe you're not fully aware of, and it's not until after you move in that you see it, and then you have to take it upon yourself to do the whole process of saying, hey, I found this, hey, I need to now fix this, and you have to deal with that whole process. And again, this could vary for everyone, and maybe the way that I'm saying it to you doesn't really mean anything, but to me this meant a lot, because when I was looking for apartments when I was in Pittsburgh, for example, the landlords let me know exactly what it was that was going on with the apartment. They let me know the Wi-Fi, they let me know how efficient it is when it gets hot or when it gets cold in terms of heating or cooling the area. They showed me everything within the house. They let me take my own time to look at the place, like where they weren't there. And they also gave me information about the neighbors, about the area, in detail that was both good and bad. So they weren't being completely biased. And this I really appreciated as a college student, because it lets me know exactly what I'm walking into. But out here, when I've been going through this whole renting out process in Madrid, everything is always great. When I asked about the different neighbors, they said, oh, they're fine, they're really quiet. When I asked about the neighborhood, he said, oh, it's great, it's a wonderful area. And while that may be true, there was no other information given to me. So you can call this a tip, you can call this a word to the wise, but also make sure that you do your own due diligence when you come out here, because you can't expect them to tell you flat out. Another thing to look out for when it comes to receiving a contract or for trying to rent out a place in Madrid, be on the lookout for scams. It's so sad that I even have to say this, because Madrid has a really high quality of life. I really love the city. I don't want to say anything bad about it, but this is something that you will experience, because I've experienced it twice. Two of the biggest red flags that you can ever be on the lookout for when it comes to renting out an apartment in Madrid is one, if an ad asks for an absurd amount of money up front without letting you tour the apartment first, or two, demanding that you pay them a certain amount of money without receiving a contract first. I know these things may sound like common sense, but in the moment, everything feels very natural. Everything feels like it's flowing very smoothly, and this is how a lot of scams can happen. You're touring an apartment, you think it looks great, they say, hey, this is what the deposit is, we just need this and first month's payment. You say, yeah, that sounds completely fine. They ask you how you want to pay, you pay, and then suddenly you realize that you never actually got a contract, you never actually signed anything, and they have your money. This has happened to friends of mine. Thank goodness it has not happened to me, but I have been in the situation where a real estate agent was showing me an apartment and he was asking me to give a specific deposit before he would even give me a contract. I asked him, I said, hey, I don't really know if I want to be here or not because I don't know what the different rules are. I don't know what the different regulations are. I'd like to see it in a contract before I pay close to, at the time, 4,000 euros. And he was like, no, but I'm not going to do all this extra work. I don't know if you're serious about it. I need to have the deposit so I know you're serious. Secure your spot and then I'll give you a contract. And maybe in this scenario, he was being completely truthful, but for me, I didn't buy it. So when it comes to going through this yourself, make sure you bring your backbone with you because you're going to need it. Checking for hidden costs is also something you should be on the lookout for when you are in the renting out process. Something that may seem really cheap could end up being super expensive if you don't take into consideration the utilities. For example, there was an apartment that I was looking at that was charging $850 for the whole thing. I thought this was a great deal, and then when I went to the place to tour it, I found out that that did not include the Wi-Fi, that did not include heating and cooling, that did not include any gas, any water, anything. And depending on the neighborhood you're in, depending on how much you use certain things, utilities can easily add up to an extra 200 or 300 euros. So what may seem like, oh, it's such a great deal because it's under 1,000, may end up being close to 12 or 13. So all this kind of goes without saying that just know your tenant rights. Know what it is that you're entitled to ask, what you're entitled to see before you actually go ahead and give a deposit on an apartment, and make sure that you feel comfortable with the contract and don't just sign if there's something that you have a question about. For one of the first ever apartments that I moved into, I didn't read the fine print because it was in Spanish and I didn't know Spanish at the time. I was kind of just doing things very quickly because I needed a place to stay ASAP. But one of the conditions was that if I left before I said that I wanted to leave, so for example, I said I wanted to leave in March and then if I actually wanted to leave in February, then that was grounds for the landlord to keep my entire deposit. And the deposit, mind you, was 1,600 euros. So when it came time for me saying, hey, I want to move out early, because I actually did want to move out in March, but I told them that I was going to move out in May, they said, well, that's fine, but we're not going to give you your deposit back. And then I had to shuffle through this really weird circumstance of not actually getting back my deposit because technically it was right there in front of me, but it was also in fine print in a different language and no one explained it to me. So as terrible as it is to say because Spanish people are so amazing, don't always trust the goodness in other people. Make sure you do your own due diligence. Make sure you translate everything. Now, a few people in the comments have asked me about this next part, so if this applies to you, great. If it doesn't, feel free to skip ahead. But when it comes to finding a good roommate in Madrid, I know that there's a lot of speculation. I know people are always really curious about how there are some success stories with roommates and how there are horror stories. For me, I never actually had to go find a roommate because when I first moved out here, I just went from doing a shared dormitory that I found on uni places, and then immediately from there, I lived with one of my friends. So when it comes to finding a good roommate, I had no say when it came to uni places because that platform can let you choose how many rooms are in the actual apartment or flat, whatever, but it doesn't let you choose the actual people that are in there. You can narrow it down based on gender, like if you only want to live with men or women, and you can narrow it down based on what they do. So if they're a student, if they're a working professional, if they're of a certain age bracket. But other than that, you're not actually able to click on a profile and say, yes, I want Joe, or yes, I want Sally. For this, I would honestly just recommend checking out different Facebook pages, different marketplaces. There's a website that was recommended to me called Badi. I'm not sure if that's actually how you pronounce it. It's Badi, but I started surfing on their website and it looks pretty legit in terms of finding a potential roommate that fits what exactly it is that you're looking for. But I would honestly say your safest bet is either talking with people on different Facebook pages, Instagram pages, whatever, meeting with them for coffee beforehand. Don't just do the whole internet chat, and then just going from there. Because I never had to deal with it, I don't really want to give you any specific advice because that would just be unethical. But I would honestly say the best case scenario you could find is just making a friend out here and then go living with them, because that's exactly what I did. So hopefully this gave you a little bit more insight as to what you can expect when it comes to finding a place in Madrid, where exactly you want to live, what you should be looking out for when it comes to the contract. All in all, living in Madrid is a really wonderful experience, especially if you are in your young young 20s, early 30s. But you do have to be vigilant. There are scammers everywhere. There are bad deals always being done. So just making sure that you do your own due diligence, you actually like the neighborhood that you're living in, you tour the apartment of the place that you want to go to first, and you have maybe one or two other people translate your document, go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and on the all in all, just feel comfortable about your decision. And feel comfortable asking questions and not backing down, even when the other person may feel stronger than you. For me, I really had to bring my backbone because it was just me touring these different apartments and having different real estate agents tell me what things should or shouldn't be, and then having my friends literally tell me it's the exact opposite. And again, I don't want to say anything bad about Madrid. I do love living here. I think it's a fantastic city, especially if you're young, but just if you have your ears and eyes open. So with that being said, thank you for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again soon.